Hey guys, tonight we step into a realm of flickering candlelight and haunting echoes, where the stones of the Tower of London still whisper tales of blood, power, and the rise and fall of Queen Anne Boleyn. You can almost feel the chill creeping along the walls, the scent of beeswax mingling with the tremor of distant breaths in the dark. Footsteps clatter, iron chains clink, and you're not going to survive this unless you steel yourself for a journey into a past both magnificent and merciless. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now in your part of the world? Drop your local time and location in the comments so I can greet you in sync with your own clock. Now, close your eyes for a moment and imagine the candlelight dancing before you. Feel your heartbeat align with the distant cadence of history. Tonight, we're not just listening to a story. We're living every moment, sensing the solitude of souls once bathed in glory. Brace your spirit, because this tale will draw you into a swirl of ambition, betrayal, and an unforgiving fate. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step lightly through the wooden door of the royal palace, immediately sensing the mingled scent of candles and brocade fabric like a cold velvet blanket. At once, you feel as though you have wandered into a living painting. Rows of gleaming white stone columns shimmer under candlelight, red damask carpets stretch to the base of the staircase, and the clattering of wooden clogs echoes like a lullaby rhythm. You are Anne Boleyn, the unusual girl who has just stepped into the world of Queen Catherine of Aragon's ladies-in-waiting. In the year 1521, Anne was chosen as one of the ladies-in-waiting at court, marking the turning point of her life from the girl bowing behind the curtains to the woman pulling the strings of the power play. You glide past the figures in the reception hall, the stern faces of nobles, the probing gazes of aging officials, and the gentle queen bowing to her guests. You smile faintly, a smile just enough to melt the ice, but not ostentatious. Occasionally, you drop a mischievous glance that makes someone mutter aloud, "This girl is unlike any other." Oh, rumour had it that Anne once hid a small piece of biscuit inside her glove, a trick to keep her voice warm, to prevent her sound from escaping when whispering in the dark. You dreamily recall the candlelight shimmering in the great hall, and the sound of Renaissance pages turning, soft as breathing. You hear a whispered voice. If you wish to survive here, never let anyone know what you are thinking. You squint and smile wryly. Oh, you won't survive at all if you stay that honest. You drift like smoke through the long corridor, where portraits of past kings hang in disarray, telling stories of triumph and betrayal. You lightly touch the portrait of Henry VIII. He looks at you with eyes of desire mingled with suspicion. Your foot trembles slightly at the thought that he, the most powerful king in Europe, would tear apart the Roman Church just to have you. Historians still debate whether Anne truly used political skill or merely her beauty to conquer Henry. The murmurs echo around you, gentle as crystal waves brushing the shore. You quietly savor the feeling of power spreading from your shoulders to your fingertips. At times you wonder, am I just a girl borrowing the rules of the game to survive, or a warrior silently manipulating an entire dynasty? You step into the banquet hall, where the soft sounds shift from lute strings to the sharp clash of goblets. Every step must be cautious. One small mistake could turn you from the pursued to the discarded. You smile once more, releasing, if you think horror movies are frightening, try being a queen's lady in waiting for a month. The wind drifts through the window, carrying a chill as though reminding you of the fragility of power. And you, Anne Boleyn, still keep your smile, still continue to whisper vague promises to an entire crown waiting ahead. The solemn background music rises, inviting you into the next chapter of the story where love, intrigue, and power weave into a dark symphony. You close the wooden door behind you, take a deep breath to sense the fragrance of candle wax and damask, then gently step into the resplendent chamber where Queen Catherine of Aragon is receiving her guests. You feel the temperature drop, each stone tile beneath your feet, still holding the chill of the morning. Each step you take echoes softly like a lullaby drum, supporting the ASMR rhythm you are pursuing. You are Anne Boleyn, the girl who has just entered the honoured but perilous role of lady-in-waiting. From the very first moment, your thin silk cloak stirs with your movement, revealing a shimmer upon your emerald dress. You listen faintly to the whispers in your ear. This is a chance to change your life, but also the most foolish trap. You smile gently. There was a time you worried, but without worry there is no leap, right? And you delight in the thrill of a racing heartbeat. In the year 1521, Catherine of Aragon appointed you as a lady-in-waiting, formally beginning your new role in the royal court. You approach the Queen, bowing just enough to show respect, yet keeping your head high, for if you bow too low, you will not see the curious gaze of Henry VIII watching you. Your eyes meet the young king's glance as he passes through the hall, a look both eager and probing. You tell yourself, he will not resist this confidence, and surely he would not survive without a touch of cunning. In the stillness, the sound of a book page turning comes from the corner, suggesting, keep your whispers gentle. You hear the faint creak of a wooden box as another lady places Catherine's portrait on the table. A small sound, yet sharp, as if challenging you to observe closely, sensitive to every detail. In one secret moment, you once noted that the Queen favoured the scent of violets from France. She kept a small pouch of dried petals to ward off seasickness. You smile faintly. Perhaps she too needed comfort after so many grand feasts. You step to the tea table, where nobles are debating a newly imported Italian ceramic. Their words splinter among crumbs of cake and sparkling sugar. You gently pick up a piece of honey sponge cake, letting the modern sweetness melt on your tongue, then lightly jest. I dare say this cake is sweeter than the honeyed promises of the court. The room chuckles softly, a jest subtle enough not to disturb the solemn air. All eyes return to the Queen when she asks about the origin of the gown you are wearing. You exhale a quiet, phew, and reply softly. This fabric was woven in Ghent, under the hands of skilled artisans. Your knowledge of Renaissance Europe makes Catherine nod approvingly, and you sense a point gained in her eyes. Yet you also notice the watchful nobles eager for a misstep. They never miss a chance to trip the newcomer. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn truly relied on her cultivated learning or merely her beauty to win Henry. The Queen's gentle voice welcomes you into her circle of confidant, yet you still feel the jealous breath of rivals at your neck. You remind yourself, a race in the rose garden is never peaceful. Then continue standing still, watching light overwhelm shadow in the chamber. You sip a little black tea, its flavour as strong as gossip. At times you shake your head softly. If you think this palace resounds only with historical debate, try listening to the whispers of schemes behind your back. The second jest falls into a quiet moment, easing the tension. The footsteps of attendants signal the beginning of a ceremony. You sharpen your ears, as though every movement plays a part in the political symphony. Your eyes catch the gleam of the floor tiles, then you release one final jest. A palace without drama must be duller than a cartoon without cats. A breeze drifts through the open window, carrying the chill of approaching evening. You sense the fading petals left on the table, reminding you of the transience of power. And you, Anne Boleyn, lightly step forward, ready to face the next trials where beauty, intellect, and courage blend to shape a story history cannot forget. Asterisk. You can feel your heartbeat slow as you pass through the heavy iron gate into the reception hall, where pale candlelight flickers against the soaring ceiling. Each drip of wax gleams like an hourglass marking the flow of history. You, Anne Boleyn, stand at the centre of the great matter, with anticipation and thrill like waiting for the trailer of a blockbuster film. If you think horror movies are frightening, try waiting for a kingdom to break from the Roman Church. At this moment, you hear the steady steps of the royal secretary bringing a thick decree sealed with the royal insignia. Henry VIII proclaims the Act of Supremacy, granting himself supreme authority over the Church of England from the Pope in the year 1534. This official historical event is not just a paper on the table, but a turning point tearing England away from Rome's influence, shaking every chapel and monastery across the realm. In the silence, you inhale deeply to recall the moment you whispered into Henry's ear the meaning of having a queen. If you want me, make me queen, not just lock me in a corner as an ornament. His eyes glimmered, both enamored and resolute, and from that moment the tide of power could not be reversed. During negotiations with the Vatican, Henry even sent a letter, along with a bed linen of Catherine of Aragon, asserting that the earlier marriage was not divinely sanctioned because it had been between sister-in-law and brother-in-law. It is said the fabric still held a faint vanilla scent from the wedding ceremony 20 years before. The gentle knock on the wooden table rang like a drum, announcing fierce debate about to begin. Ambassadors and Vatican lawyers clashed. Drafts written, seals pressed, promises of support from European monarchs calculated. You stand aside, hearing the whisper. If this battle fails, she will not only lose the crown but also her life. Another light jest. At least we don't have to sign online shopping contracts, or we'd fear delivery delays. Oh. Amidst the divided voices, some insisted the move was essential self-determination. Others warned that breaking from Rome would usher in religious chaos, dividing believers across the nation. You quietly note. Historians still debate whether Henry's motives were truly love for Anne or ambition to seize monastic wealth. The sound of Latin pages turning echoed with the blotting of fresh ink, inviting you to skim each clause. You could almost sense the priests' breaths, the furrows on their brows as they read the declaration. The King of England is now the supreme head of the faith. A sentence more shocking than the finale of a political drama series. The scene recalls a modern courtroom. Hidden cameras, lawyers on deadline, spotlights blazing like a talk show stage. But here, instead of lights, there is candle glow, and instead of microphones, faithful voices echo through cold stone halls. You smile wryly. If there were live streaming, viewership would surpass every reality show. As the decree was read aloud, each word, supremacy, rang like a great church bell at noon. You closed your eyes, hearing in your mind the wind through the cracked window, a moth brushing past, and the soft swish of silk skirts as you turned. That fragile yet mighty sensation reminded you that you, a young woman with a keen intellect, were etching the mark of an unprecedented religious revolution. Beyond official debates, secret meetings unfolded in shadowy archives, where the scent of old paper mixed with borax. There you witnessed the moment Cromwell whispered to Henry, "If we are resolute, no one will dare oppose you." The words stung, like lemons squeezed into warm tea, sorrowful yet bracing. As night descended, candlelight cast faint glimmers, and you stood at the window gazing out at the brick courtyard. The bells of Westminster tolled in the distance, reminding that the rupture from Rome was only a prelude. You thought, the road ahead will be longer than a moonless night. A gentle calm settled as you reflected on the scent of bed linen, Catherine's violet perfume, and burning candle wax in the gallery. All blended into a low note, drawing you into meditation amid political chaos. And you, Anne Boleyn, remained steadfast, the woman at the centre of the great matter, resolute amid waves of power, shaping a chapter of history never to be forgotten. You stand in the small ceremonial chamber, where the flickering yellow candlelight dances upon the cold stone walls, as if to chase away the warmth you are feeling. Around you there is only yourself and Henry, two people writing a secret powerful enough to shake all of Europe. You smile faintly, inhaling the light scent of incense burning in the corner of the room. In the dim light, each steady breath rises like an ASMR melody, making your heart beat slow and tender. You bow your head before the priest who has performed the ceremony for you, but still keep it raised high enough to see Henry standing there, his eyes glowing with determination. In that moment, you ask yourself, are you truly ready to bear the crown, or are you just a lady-in-waiting suddenly turned queen? Surely you won't have time to change your high-heeled clogs to match your new status. In January of the year 1533, under the protection of the loyal, you and Henry secretly held a wedding in the underground chapel of the palace, where only a few close attendants knew. There were no trumpets, no procession, only whispered vows and a simple, sacred ritual. You held Henry's hand tightly, feeling the warmth radiating from eyes full of love, and also full of calculation from a king ready to tear apart every law to have you. The soft silk fabric of your wedding gown brushed against your skin, reminding you, from this moment, you were no longer the girl hiding behind the curtains, but the one standing at the heart of political storms. As you stepped outside, You caught the eyes of your closest friends, the ladies who had followed you from the beginning. They gave you nods of encouragement, though all knew, in only a few months, you would wear the harshest crown in Europe. You smile wryly. Perhaps I'll trade a few jars of skin cream for a few jeweled rings, won't I? Time flows as swiftly as dripping wax in an hourglass. In less than 6 months, on the 1st of June in 1533, you ascend the platform of Westminster Abbey amidst a sea of rejoicing people. Sunlight streams through the stained glass, painting your royal robe with shimmering rays like the Milky Way. Sacred hymns resound, blending with church bells like a symphony welcoming a new queen. It is said that during the coronation, you secretly placed a small ivory comb inside the crown, a reminder to yourself never to forget softness, even while holding supreme power. You feel each sunbeam curve across your face at the moment the crown is placed upon your head. The heavy weight mixed with exhilaration makes you recall a modern morning when you gently open a gift box, not knowing what lies inside. Hopefully it won't be a joyful tax bill. The sacred voices of hymns lull you into a dream of power. You look down at the crowd below their faces, filled with amazement, faith, hope, and a touch of uncertainty. You think, they are all waiting to see if the new queen can give them a prince or only bring more struggles. Amidst the solemn air, you hear the whispers of nobles beside you. She will not keep the crown for long. A mocking tone hidden beneath glittering robes. You smile inwardly in reply. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn was truly worthy or only Henry's political tool. Perhaps they just draft their records based on YouTube likes. What would they know? After the coronation, you quietly leave the abbey to the sound of thunderous applause. The late spring wind carries the scent of roses scattered across the stone-paved path. You smell fresh blossoms mixed with road dust, a fragrance both modern and ancient, like walking in high heels through a bustling London street. You exhale slowly, as if syncing your breath with the breath of the entire kingdom. The glittering crown upon your head is not merely jewelry, but a silent vow. You must prove yourself worthy. And from that moment, every gaze follows your every step, every gesture, every smile. Each time you touch the silk ribbon, each breath you release, it becomes the focus of courtly gossip. You walk through the long corridor, leading back to your private chamber, where you will prepare for the difficult days ahead. Each step of your clogs upon the wooden floor resounds softly, reminding you, power is not only radiant light, but also a burden never to be put down. You quietly look at yourself in the old mirror, seeing the figure of a woman who knows both humility and calculation. You smile. If you think life is only a fairy tale, try wearing the queen's gown once, and then you let your mind relax, letting the hum of silence seep into every corner of your soul, preparing for the next part where you will face the pressure of childbirth, the betrayal of allies, and the most perilous steps of your life. You grip the edge of the ebony table, feeling the rough grains under your skin, as if drawing strength from the very past you are about to inscribe. The air around you softens as candlelight reflects upon the mirror, illuminating each feature. You gently close your eyes, letting the sacred hymns of memory and the breaths of the present merge into one. A breeze slips through the narrow crack of the window, carrying the chill of night, reminding you that even though the crown gleams, night still falls, and the royal dream must face the trials of dawn. You, Anne Boleyn, inhale deeply and open your eyes, ready to continue writing the story of power, love, and fate, under the splendor and the shadows of 16th century Europe. Asterisk. You wake to the distant song of birds and the chill of late autumn seeping through the wooden window. In the room, the candle flames flicker out and then flare again, rising and falling like the slow rhythm of the breath you try to keep. You, Anne Boleyn, are cradling your little daughter Elizabeth in your arms, but in your mind you hear clearly each sigh of Henry drifting from the next room. It is not the sound of joy at welcoming a princess, but the heavy disappointment that the firstborn child was not a male heir. On the 7th of September, in 1533, Queen Anne gave birth to Princess Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace, opening a new chapter for the Tudor line. The scent of baby powder and velvet from Elizabeth's swaddling clothes mingles with the smell of old oak wood and rosemary adorning the air. A combination of modern and ancient, like a latte blended with fragrant wine. You tilt your head softly at your baby, smiling tenderly, but your heart tightens. You feel the weight of pressure from every side, courtiers whispering, the people expectant, and most of all, Henry's eyes bright when dreaming of a prince, but dimmed when looking at Elizabeth. The miscarriages that follow come like cold winds in the night. Each time you wake trembling in your sleep, it is as if you hear a gentle knock at your heart's door. Again, not a boy. You try drinking ginger tea a little, known remedy to ease nausea, and tell yourself, at least my stomach will not betray me. If ginger tea could make princes, it would be the national drink. As you endure the sorrow of loss, the conservative faction at court begins openly criticizing you. Rumors spread that Anne Boleyn was arrogant, overshadowed old noble powers, intruded into private councils, and even spoke boldly to foreign ambassadors about limiting monastic privileges, a subject more sensitive than any modern political drama. The sound of criticism rings through stone corridors. She has no restraint, she should be more humble. You smile inwardly. If I am too humble, they might forget I exist. According to some chroniclers, Anne once asked the royal physician to plant a special variety of lemongrass in the palace garden to steam in the bedroom and ease back pain after each miscarriage. The faint fragrance was believed to summon luck, but in truth it only soothed the pain temporarily. As you waver between hope and despair, Henry gradually loses interest. He turns to Jane Seymour, a girl of gentle demeanour, well-mannered, with a smile like a crescent moon. Jane does not wrap herself in power as you do. She gives Henry peace, like sitting before a fireplace in the frozen night. Each glance Henry gives Jane pierces your heart like an arrow, yet you must remain composed. A queen is never allowed to lose control from jealousy. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn was truly targeted only for failing to bear a son, or whether she obstructed those who sought to support the old religious faction. In the royal audiences, you walk slowly through the archway, your heels clicking like a drumbeat, urging you on. You smell the lingering wine from the previous night's feast, and remind yourself, at least wine does not betray me like men do. A good glass of wine may be a more reliable refuge than the throne. The pressure grows heavier with every public appearance. You must smile gracefully, reply politely, yet show authority. Every word you speak, every step you take, is recorded, analysed, and debated. You barely have the freedom to breathe, only biting your lips and thinking, if I falter an inch, they will cast me down a mile. Each night, returning to the silent chamber, you gaze at the portrait of Catherine of Aragon hanging on the wall, the woman once deemed rootless for not producing a son. You wonder, will history repeat itself with me? The hollow ache of regret rises each time candlelight reflects in your sorrowful eyes. Amidst the burden of no male heir, you still sense the warmth of friendship. A few ladies remain by your side, gently laying a hand on your shoulder, whispering, you will be remembered not only for royal blood, but for resilience. You nod faintly, comforting yourself. At least someone still believes in me. Yet the seeds of betrayal take root. Cromwell's secret letters to Henry claim that Jane will give him his first son, and Henry seems to believe such temptations. Each thought of Jane twists your heart, but you reveal nothing. Queen Boleyn does not weep. She clenches her hands, staring at the vaulted ceiling, where candlelight glimmers like a reminder. Keep fighting. Late at night, the wind through the cracks of the door recalls the feeling of freedom in the wide green woods. You silently wish for a simple dream, to live peacefully with a small family on a lavender hill, rather than in a palace your heart never truly belonged to. You smile wryly. If I planted lavender here, Henry might think me mad. At last, you sink into the velvet-covered bed, letting the hum of fabric and your own heavy breaths blend into the stillness. You, Anne Boleyn, amidst the pressure of childbirth and the signs of collapse, still hold your gaze steady. For only resilience creates legend, and your legend has only just begun. You walk through the long, endless corridor, where the dim candlelight reflects upon the portraits of past kings, and each of your footsteps echoes like the slow rhythm of ASMR background music. In your head resounds the whisper, power comes quickly, but keeping it is the true art. You, Anne Boleyn, after giving birth to Princess Elizabeth, once stood at the height of glory when Henry VIII granted you the authority to lead programs for aiding the poor and reforming the royal charitable structure. In the year 1534, you initiated the Royal Charity Fund, organising warm meals for the poor of London and providing medical aid for garrisons along the Welsh border, earning unceasing public admiration at first. You feel the light breeze from the half-opened window, carrying the scent of oak wood in the secret council chamber. The space around you is warm, yet your heart is cold as you hear the murmurs behind your back. The Queen interferes more and more, overstepping the bounds of noble authority. You smile faintly. You are always confident, though sometimes you still feign trembling under scrutinizing gazes. At the centre of the room, earls and marquesses debate fervently. They present arguments full of authority. Lady Boleyn's decision to distribute food directly to the people has stripped us of our control. She is breaking ancient traditions, bypassing any legislative council. The hoarse voices resound like alarm bells, warning you that conflict is mounting. In your private chamber lies a small wooden box containing secret letters of gratitude from the poor, hastily written upon scraps of cloth. These letters you always keep close to your heart, a small secret to remind yourself of your original goal. Power is to serve, not to be served. You step outside to the small stone courtyard, where a few rose bushes remain after the passing winter. Each soft petal scattered upon the ground is a reminder that beauty may fade, but the cracks upon the trunk endure forever. You gently brush a petal, whispering, "If power is the mountaintop, then compassion is the spring. But if the spring is lost, the mountain is but a cold crag of stone." Not far away, conservative nobles, those whose portraits were absent from the gallery you passed, watch your every move. They hold secret councils, plotting ways to curtail your influence. You know there are no whips, no swords, but authority may crumble swiftly by only a few lines of intrigue. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn truly advanced charitable reforms out of compassion, or whether it was a political stratagem to raise prestige and consolidate personal power. The soft sound of teacups striking silver trays rings gently. You sip a cup of mint tea, the cool taste spreading through your mouth, sharpening your clarity amidst the political storm. You gaze into the glass beside the table, seeing your reflection, hair tied neatly, face lightly adorned, eyes glowing with determination. You tell yourself, "They may deny every effort, but I will not let myself be erased in rumour." You return to the council hall, where rows of marble seats face the throne newly dyed in vivid hues. Foreign ambassadors whisper among themselves, their voices tinged with curiosity and caution. You sense the energy, like a current running through your spine, warning that your position is wavering. You step gently onto the dais, your voice warm. "We must affirm that charity is not only a duty, but an obligation of all classes. No one shall be forgotten upon the streets of London." Scattered applause sounds, but you hear clearly the slander from the back rows. "She speaks far too much in Henry's stead." Oh. You sit down, brushing your silk gown to reveal, with subtlety, the pearl bracelet, a gift from a merchant who supported your fund. You smile wryly. "Perhaps I should show them my ledger, to prove that charity money is not for personal indulgence." The hall laughs softly, though you know exactly who among them watches most keenly. While you focus on numbers and reports, suddenly you hear the wind slip through the half-closed window, carrying the damp, mouldy scent from the cistern below. That sound reminds you. Sovereignty too has its dark moments, when every door slams shut. You rise, grip the edge of the table, feeling the rough wooden grain beneath your fingertips. You draw a long, steady breath, letting it merge into the silence, and tell yourself, power is not for those who yield easily. In that moment, you catch the gaze of an old nobleman fixed upon you, his eyes calculating. "If I wait for the right time, the Queen will fall by herself." You smile mysteriously, answering in your heart, "If you want me to fall, first test your strength against mine." You turn and step out, the clattering of your clogs echoing repeatedly, like the heartbeat you strive to steady. You look up at the grey sky beyond the window, where clouds hang thick like velvet curtains, and you think, politics is no different from a drizzle, wet, cold, but enough to wash away the dirt. You pause in the stone-paved courtyard, draw a long breath, letting the chill seep through your cloak. You softly let out a jest. "If London's weather is as fickle as this court, at least I need not worry about buying umbrellas forever." A small laugh rises within you, like a spark in the night. At last, you tell yourself, the weakening of authority never happens overnight. It gradually makes you doubt yourself, makes others question your worth. You wrap your arms around yourself, as if to fortify your spirit, and step into the solid wooden door leading to your private chamber, where you may close off the schemes outside and hear only your own beating heart. In the space filled only with the hum of wind and your own breathing, you close your eyes, letting calm seep into every fibre of your being, like a natural sedative. You, Anne Boleyn, though power may waver, still hold fast your spirit and resilience, ready for the next trials, when true authority is tested in the storm of betrayal. Asterisk. You close the solemn door behind you, listening to the clattering of wooden clogs echoing slowly along the marble corridor. Each cold stone tile still carries the chill of morning autumn, reminding you that power too may make one tremble. You, Anne Boleyn, have just endured the strain of political disputes and relentless criticism, and yet, while you still strive to keep your place, another shadow, gentle and quiet, has silently entered the court. You can hear your own soft breath as you recall the day Henry first introduced Jane Seymour before the court. It was an undeniable, pivotal event. At the end of the year 1535, Jane Seymour officially became the king's regular companion, appearing beside him in royal audiences and courtly ceremonies, laying the foundation for a deepening relationship. There was no dazzling radiance like a coronation or whispered betrothal vows. Jane's appearance was so modest one might miss it without noticing. You remember the delicate silk fluttering in the breeze as she entered the hall, light as a butterfly stirring in the stillness. The atmosphere warmed, and you caught sight of Henry, who once showered you with fervent eyes, now hesitating in his gaze at Jane, filled with tenderness and trust. In the archive room, where rolls of Latin parchment and black ink once bore witness to endless schemes, you hear the creak of pages from a small diary, Jane's keepsake for recording every moment beside Henry. Jane Seymour once hid within that diary a dried rose, a token from a secret walk with Henry by the banks of the Thames. That purple rose, she said, symbolized loyalty and sacrifice, and Jane kept it as a treasure. You walk slowly through the great chamber, where courtiers discuss diplomatic strategies, yet your eyes are fixed only upon Henry and Jane's seats. They sit close together, their eyes meeting more tenderly than the morning sun. There are no harsh whispers, no suspicious glances, only a peace astonishing in its simplicity. You ask yourself, can a single smile conquer the sword of politics? The hum of an oil lamp, changing its flame, flickers across the walls, creating a still scene like an animated painting, lacking only the whisper of piano music. Perhaps I should bring headphones to achieve the full ASMR effect. You inhale deeply, as the scent of candle wax mingles with the violet fragrance of Jane's handkerchief drifting into your nose. The serene feeling makes your heart ache with a trace of longing, but also serves as a warning. You are losing your place. You raise your head to the high vaulted ceiling, where oil paintings depict the victories and glorious days of the Tudor dynasty. Each brushstroke seems to recount a story of power, at times radiant, at times fading. You wonder, if these paintings could speak, who would they criticize first? Most likely those who love editing the style of wording in royal records. Amid secret councils, the conservatives swiftly seize this moment to sow doubt. You hear clearly the whispers. Look, the current queen is too loud, but the successor is quiet, more trustworthy. All the chatter swirls like a strong wind rustling through branches, shaking leaves and unsettling your very heart. Historians still debate whether Henry VIII was truly conquered by Jane Seymour's gentle nature, or by the desire for a wife more fitting to royal politics than Anne. You can feel each heartbeat slow as that question echoes within your mind. Indeed, perhaps Henry sought balance in Jane after his tensions with Anne, but was that true love, or merely a scheme to restructure power within the court? You continue toward the ceremonial chamber, where rows of oak seats await a formal tea gathering. Jane sits upright, holding a cup of mint tea, her favorite drink, for calming the mind after a long day, a wellness secret rarely confessed by royalty. You see Jane smile at Henry, her gaze gentle, devoid of calculation. Henry responds with a warm smile, as if it were the most peaceful moment amid political storms. The sound of a silver spoon tapping against porcelain rings strangely, suddenly becoming a signal to you. Stay alert. You sip a cup of rose, infused tea, the sweet yet light flavor helping you keep your head clear amidst the storm of emotions. Third light jest. Perhaps rose tea might even stop unpleasant rumors. You glance at Jane, then Henry, then back at yourself in the mirror upon the wall. The reflection reveals a strong woman, yet full of anxiety. You remind yourself, power is the harshest trial. Those who lack suppleness will easily break. Before leaving the room, you grasp Jane's hand lightly, a gesture seemingly friendly, but enough to let her feel the hidden challenge. Jane's eyes flicker in brief surprise, but quickly close off. You know, in that moment, Jane understood you would not be so easily replaced. Yet the irony is, you cannot display open opposition. You can only use silence as a warning. The sound of wind along the corridor stirs again, soft as a whispered caution. Anne, be careful, for sovereignty is never stable. You leave the room, quietly closing the heavy door. The corridor returns to silence, broken only by the clatter of clogs and the rhythm of your own breath. You pause, inhale slowly, letting your breath merge with the low hum of the space, preparing your resolve for the next steps. Under flickering candlelight, your shadow stretches upon the wall, a figure both steadfast and torn between power and love. You smile to yourself. Power may shift swiftly, but a resilient heart will always find its way back. And from that moment, you, Anne Boleyn, are ready to face every storm, even if the king's heart has turned, even if Jane Seymour has settled into his soul. The tale of loyalty, power, and love is only beginning a new dramatic chapter. Asterisk. You quietly step into the dark chamber, where only the faint glow of oil lamps hanging low upon rough brick walls casts its dim light. Silence reigns, broken only by the crackle of melting wax, mixed with distant whispers like an ASMR lullaby. You, Anne Boleyn, can feel the eyes of Thomas Cromwell watching from the shadows, a gaze once full of reverence, now tainted with dark calculation. The scene around you is like a political play, an old ebony table at the centre, covered with large rolls of parchment stamped and scrawled with tiny letters, alongside a quill dripping black ink. Each droplet falls drip like nails piercing deep into your heart. Light jest. You wish you could trade Cromwell's seal for a lottery ticket stamp to change your fortune more easily. In the year 1536, Thomas Cromwell, as Royal Chancellor, presided over the drafting of false indictments of adultery and treason, preparing for the trial to dethrone Queen Anne Boleyn. You take a deep breath, trying to keep your breathing steady. You know Cromwell was once an ally, a companion in the early days of reform, but now he chooses the conservative side, the royal puppeteers who seek to sweep away your influence. Your heart hardens as you recall the memory. When you and he together planned the seizure of monastic wealth, dividing the royal treasury, Cromwell once vowed eternal loyalty to Anne. In Cromwell's secret library, they found a splendid quill set, engraved Lord of the Crown, and made from Indian peacock feathers, a symbol of ambition so brazen few dared touch it. You step closer to the table, eyes scanning the accusations. Anne committed adultery with Sir Henry Norris at Windsor Castle on the 7th of October 1535. Anne consorted secretly with George Boleyn on the 2nd of April 1536. The evidence matches the testimony of 5 witnesses who had been bribed. Each line, each mark, like an invisible arrow striking at your faltering power. A faint sound echoes as you press your ear to the cold stone wall. The clash of metal. Perhaps Cromwell's soldiers arranging the guard for the coming trial. You feel the chill seep through your silk gown as if warning, tonight your fate will be sealed. You close your eyes, recalling the day Cromwell proudly showed you his draft of reform. The plan to redistribute monastery wealth, to lay the foundation for schools and public hospitals. You once believed he would help you build a prosperous England, but ambition has turned him into the very hand pushing you toward the abyss. If Cromwell loved change so much, perhaps he should try a tailor's trade, refitting the garments of politics. In your mind resounds the old question, without Cromwell, could I withstand the court storms? But now, the man gripping the pen tighter than any sword Is he the one who once shared your triumph? Historians still debate the true cause of Cromwell's betrayal of Anne. Was it merely to support Henry and safeguard his office, or a genuine ideological rift? You gently lay your hand upon a scroll, feeling the rough grain of wood like a wilderness waiting to swallow you. You whisper inwardly, "Someone may cut off my head, but no one can erase the ink upon history." The steady drip of ink continues, urging you to hold fast your inner strength. You step into the corridor, where white stone columns cast your shadow long across the dark floor. The candlelight flickers, forming a glowing path toward the cold Tower of London. You hear the wind whistling through narrow windows, carrying the acrid tang of the Thames not far away. Every sound reminds you, destruction may come from anywhere. You turn back to look at the oil painting of Henry VIII, mighty upon horseback, lance in hand, crown gleaming. That painting was once a symbol of your power as his consort, but now it reminds you, power does not endure. You smile wryly. If this painting could speak, it would say, "Sorry, the old wife is gone. The new wife is waiting." Footsteps sound behind you once more. You turn to see a soldier of Cromwell awaiting the order of arrest. You stand still, your gaze cold. "I have the right to refute every charge." Yet you know, in this political play, your refutation will never suffice to block the fatal blow about to fall. You close your eyes, hearing the rasp of ink drying on parchment, the whisper of the tower's walls, and your own breathing. Each breath steady like a small drum within your chest. You step forward, gently pick up one of the scrolls, gazing at the crimson seal, the color of blood and power. You stroke the edge of the scroll, as if caressing yourself not to falter. Then you slowly fold the scroll, placing it upon the table with calm detachment, as though it were but a clumsy love letter. You think, Cromwell may hold the papers, but I hold the people's memory, and history will prove it. The faint crumple of parchment sounds like a challenge. You turn toward the window, where the early spring sunlight streams faintly through the gap. Its warmth brushes your cheek, dissolving a fragment of the cold. You take a deep breath, letting your breath merge with the light, and open the door to step out, where the hall awaits the decisive footsteps of destiny. In front of the hall, the ensemble of lute and viol had been arranged for the royal banquet. The music was ready to rise, but you knew it was only the background for a political purge. You stepped into the crowd, your eyes gliding over each face. Some smiled in greeting, others secretly pursed their lips in hushed whispers. You smiled in return, as if to show them that you still carried the poise of Queen Boleyn until the very last moment. As the first notes sounded, you closed your eyes, letting the gentle music soothe your fractured heart. The strings seemed to chide you. Do not weep, for politics is not for the faint of heart. You smiled, letting out a light jest. If I must leave the throne, I hope the lute will follow me to the castle, so I will still have ASMR music when I meditate. Ibu. And then, you, Anne Boleyn, walked slowly across the hall, amid flickering candles and the hazy sound of music, preparing to face the plot of downfall from Thomas Cromwell, once an ally, now the most determined enemy. In your heart you still held faith. True power lies not only on the throne, but in the resilient heart of a woman ready to stand even against the storm. Asterisk. You gently pushed the heavy door of Whitehall Palace, stepping into the sombre room lit only by a few solitary candles. The silence was thick, the chill from the stone walls seeping into your skin, making you, Anne Boleyn, feel each steady breath like a soft drumbeat in your ears. In the corner sat Thomas Cromwell behind an ebony desk, the firelight flickering against his brow, shaping a figure both familiar and filled with intrigue. You drew a deep breath, keeping your voice smooth like an ASMR tone as you stepped forward. Cromwell had once been your loyal ally, the man who tore down monastery veils with you to release the royal treasury, to fund vast charitable projects. But now, he had become the architect of the cruelest downfall you had ever witnessed. In April of 1536, Cromwell officially presented to Henry VIII the indictment accusing you of adultery and treason, marking the beginning of the swift trial at the Tower of London. The candlelight flickered, casting Cromwell's face in icy sharpness. He turned each page, the forged evidence carefully staged, testimonies from 5 bribed witnesses, a secret letter accusing you of liaisons with Sir Henry Norris, and vague records of a midnight meeting with your brother George Boleyn. Each page was like an invisible noose tightening around your power, pulling you into the abyss. If Cromwell enjoyed writing scripts so much, he might have had his own political television show. You stepped quietly closer to the table, listening to the scratch of the quill on parchment, each tap-tap piercing your heart like a needle through flesh. You remembered the days when Cromwell and you planned reforms together, seizing monastic wealth, redistributing to the poor, founding schools, hospitals. You once thanked him silently for opening the path to your dream of power to serve. Yet that same ambition had now turned into the lever pushing you into peril. In Cromwell's secret memoir, they later found a note about a ring engraved with the words, "Fortune favours the cunning," which he wore while drafting indictments, as a talisman for all his schemes. You raised your head, watching Cromwell lift his quill, slowly stamping the dried ink on each copy of the indictment. The royal seal, crimson as spilled blood, stained the paper. You felt the entire room spin, the drip of drying ink merging with the sound of your own quickened breath. You told yourself, if history is printed in red ink, this is its bloodiest page. In that moment, Cromwell paused, turning toward you, his eyes flaunting triumph. Your Majesty, this time you cannot escape. His voice was both cold and confident, like a hypnotic command. The evidence is sufficient. You smiled wryly. Cromwell, if you truly had enough evidence, why keep circling with endless theatrics? The humming wind through the narrow crack in the door echoed like a challenge. Let us see if these papers can truly strip away your throne. You gave no reply, only stepped calmly toward the window. Outside, the moon hung adrift in a gloomy sky, reminding, a long night awaits. You glanced at the word treason, printed boldly atop the first page of the indictment. The black strokes across the parchment seemed like cracks spreading along palace walls, drawing a map of inescapable intrigue. You touched the paper lightly, feeling the coarse ridges of each letter. Those very letters were writing your end, yet you would not remain silent. Historians still debate the degree of Cromwell's initiative. Was he merely Henry's shield, or did he truly plot Anne's removal due to ideological conflict? You turned back to Cromwell, your eyes steady. You knew you could not snap that quill, but you could wield another pen, the pen of religious devotion and public sentiment to write truth. You told yourself, if Cromwell has cunning, I have the sovereign power of the people's heart. The footsteps of guards pounded along the corridor. Outside, the trial was about to begin. You and Cromwell both heard the voice call aloud, Queen Anne Boleyn, prepare yourself. You strode toward the door, leaving him in flickering light, so he might see the shadow of a proud spirit unbroken. You carried with you a small scroll, your testament written before the trial, left for your daughter Elizabeth. Within it, you recorded the truth of love and intrigue, so that future generations might know history is not only condemnation, but also pride. If Cromwell ever read this testament, he might pack his bags for early retirement. As you walked the corridor toward the courtroom at the Tower of London, the cold wind from the Thames rushed in, soothing like a whisper. Whatever fate awaits, a resilient soul will endure. You clutched the testament, your eyes fixed forward, ready to face the downfall plotted by Thomas Cromwell, once an ally, now your trap-setter. Amid the howling wind and the echo of clogs, you, Anne Boleyn, entered the courtroom, carrying the fire of resilience and the belief that truth would outlast every scheme. Asterisk. You felt your wooden clogs tremble as you stepped through the iron gate of the Tower of London. The chill wrapped around you at once, like an invisible hand tightening its grip upon your body. The clink of metal sounded as guards locked your wrists in irons. You heard each toll of the church bells nearby echoing, like the final beats of power before its extinction. On the 2nd of May, 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested at the royal palace and swiftly transferred to the Tower of London on charges of adultery, incest, and treason. You barely had time to blink. No chance to react. A few royal attendants whispered over the guards' shoulders. She is accused with 5 lovers, including her brother George. The rumours spread as swiftly as tweets at rush hour, but you knew the truth was far more complex. The conflicting testimonies of times and places were no more than political playing cards to bring you down. If history had a check-in app, surely their schedules would have been proven wrong. You descended the spiral stone staircase, your hands still numb from the iron cuffs. The echo of boots rang back into your mind, creating a strange ASMR effect, letting you loosen for a moment, though you knew you were being watched. The damp scent of the dungeon lingered, and the dripping of water tapped steadily, reminding you that time moves on, waiting for no one. When brought into your cell, you saw 4 cold grey stone walls, still marked by centuries of dampness. Only a few ragged blankets were thrown onto the ground, and the sole light flickered through a high, narrow slit of a window. The isolation was so complete that each of your breaths resounded like a solitary cello note. In the dark prison, there was one brick patched with a different hue of mortar rumour. Said Anne once scratched her name there with her nail to mark her waiting days. You sat on the old wooden cot, your spine pressed against the shadowed wall. Your loyal ladies in waiting, your most trusted companions, quietly brought water and coarse bread to you. Their whispers floated like a lullaby. Stay calm, flower of Tudor. Truth will one day be revealed. You smiled faintly in the dark, telling yourself, at least this bread carries no foolish rumour. If bread could acquit me, I would already be full. You closed your eyes, letting your mind drift through moments of past glory. The sacred hymns at Westminster, the brilliance of the crown, Henry's smile when you first met. Now only darkness and the sound of your own breath remained. Each slow breath thudded like a drum, pulling you back from panic. One lady placed her hand upon your shoulder, whispering, "Those contradictory proofs are but a play." You felt the warmth of her small hand like a message. "Be steadfast." You smiled as though replying inwardly, "This play I know well, its actors and its director." The footsteps upstairs echoed down, signalling the secret trial about to begin. You heard each sound of the verdict awaiting, the passing of papers, the crackle of drying ink on damp wood, and the solemn thud of seals. You wondered, are they lining up to collect wedding robes to wear for the trial? Perhaps they thought this was a royal tea party, guests bustling in and out. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn was truly given a fair trial, or if she was the victim of a sophisticated political campaign. You rose, walked to the stone wall, placed your hand on the etched name, then touched the patch of differently coloured cement. The feel of the carving under your nail reminded you, even in confinement, you can still leave a mark. You drew in a deep breath, sensing the dampness of the cobbles seeping into your chest, making your heart ache for warmth outside. You turned, looking at the loyal lady in waiting who met your gaze. "Bring me a little more water, enough for me to swear I will not surrender." They nodded, like comrades before battle. The clink of cups against each other rang out like the gong at the start of war drums. The dim candlelight cast long shadows across the wall, as if the chamber itself revived in streaks of darkness. You let slip one final jest. "If this play truly has a happy ending, perhaps they will let me see the script for part 2. The words fell into silence, like a tiny spark in the night. You leaned back against the stone wall, eyes lifted to the narrow window slit. Outside, London's fog coiled in layers, misty like a secret curtain. You caught the distant tolling of Westminster's bells, as if they marked the nearness of fate. And then, you, Anne Boleyn, sat in the cold prison cell, amid the hostile eyes of the court, keeping calm like an ASMR artist, awaiting the final beats of a historic play to be performed. You told yourself, whatever the script may hold, I remain queen in the hearts of those who know the truth. Asterisk. You stepped into the courtroom with steady strides, though inside your chest it felt as if hundreds of bees were beating their wings. The candlelight from torches along the stone walls cast wavering glows, creating a visual music akin to ASMR, relaxing yet dramatic. You held your head high, eyes confident, lips faintly smiling, ready for the mid-May trial of 1536. In mid-May of 1536, Anne Boleyn was brought to trial at the Tower of London on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, and within only a few hours, every verdict had already been preordained. When the witnesses were led into the chamber, you noticed beads of sweat on their brows, signs of carefully coached testimony. Each wore an uneasy look, placed at just the right spot, At just the right time in the script, you let slip a light jest. Perhaps if they had rehearsed one more session, they would look more professional than a sitcom cast. The quiet laughter echoed inside you, easing the injustice for a moment. The rustle of documents filled the air as the judge read the charges. You have violated the vow of marriage with many men, including your brother George Boleyn, and conspired to overthrow the crown. The monotone declaration fell like a lonely drumbeat in the night, making your heart tremble. You placed your hand upon your chest, feeling each beat, reminding yourself that though the verdict may be cold, your heart was still warm. It was said that among the evidence lay a piece of Catherine of Aragon's bed linen, used as proof that the prior marriage was unlawful. That cloth still carried the scent of vanilla, a reminder to Henry of the past, though that past had been upturned. You sat upon the wooden bench, your posture straight, straining to catch every word. Around you, the murmurs of guards flowed gently like ocean waves at shore, urging you to remain calm. You inhaled deeply, then exhaled softly, steadying your heartbeat. If the palace had an air conditioner, perhaps it would have been more comfortable. Beneath the authority of the court, hidden enemies cloaked themselves in black robes, an image like something from a horror film painting. Yet you did not fear. Your eyes still blazed, determined to demand justice. You stood, your voice rising gently. I demand the right to defend myself, under the very laws set by the crown. Your words carried warmth, laced with subtle irony, forcing even the uneasy audience to listen. The court was silent for a long moment. You looked around, catching Henry VIII's eyes passing over you cold, tinged with regret. In that instant, you asked yourself, does he realize he is twisting the blade into the one who was once his love? Perhaps this court needed a subtitle screen for clarity. All evidence, though contradictory in time and place, was read as if it were irrefutable truth. You gently raised your hand, speaking, "These testimonies do not align. I implore the court to examine real evidence." The voice was humble, yet firm, unsettling some witnesses, yet all decisions had already been arranged. On the 15th of May, you were sentenced to death. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn's trial was purely political theatre, or whether at least some charges held any basis. The flickering candlelight seemed to challenge the spectacle. You gazed at the wavering torch, scanning the chamber, then replied softly, "If this court is but a stage curtain, I shall not bow before such a careless ending." The words resounded like the final note before the lights extinguished. After the trial, when the judge read the sentence, you felt each word, death, strike the air, choking the chamber. You nodded slightly, receiving the judgment with proud silence, as though ready to step into the coda of your life. You did not even allow a tear to fall, only letting your soul rest quietly within. The trial ended, and you stepped out, candlelight glinting upon your fine hair and the unseen crown above your head. You smiled like an actor, receiving applause after the final act. With slow steps leaving the courtroom, you left behind the sound of firm clapping, as if affirming, "I have lived true to the Tudor name, though this fate be unjust." In the corridor leading back to the cell, the echo of your heels beat quickly, reminding you of the racing heartbeat of a nation awaiting the outcome. You told yourself, the scripted trial may extinguish authority, but it cannot kill legacy. If history were to be reborn, surely this part would make the most captivating spin-off. And then, you, Anne Boleyn, walked into the dungeon with eyes unyielding, ready to face the 15th of May, 1536, where darkness and light would meet in the final moment before the sentence was carried out. You open your eyes after a restless sleep, inhaling deeply the scent of spent candles and the faint lavender falling from a small bouquet in the corner of the cell. The 4 short days of fate slip through your fingers like sand. You, Anne Boleyn, know there will be no final letter from Henry, no farewell to Elizabeth, only the silence of the Tower of London, for you to wrap each remaining moment with your own hands. You place your hand on the rough stone wall, feeling the dampness imprinted by centuries into every groove. The steady drip of water outside the cell echoes like a slow drum, lulling you away from panic. Each breath you steady like a meditation exercise, keeping your soul from straying back into the noisy past. From the 15th to the 19th of May, 1536, Anne Boleyn spent her final 4 days in the Tower of London, devoted to prayer, forgiveness, and preparing her spirit for the end. You kneel beside the small stone table, murmuring prayers and asking for peace upon your soul. The fragrance of incense spreads, mingling with coarse cloth, creating a natural ASMR symphony, gentle yet profound. You close your eyes, hearing the ripples of the Thames drifting through the iron bars across the river, as if the tide called your soul back to the sea. If the sea could give you a lifebuoy, perhaps you would have let go of the crown long ago. The loyal ladies in waiting, the few who remain quietly, bring rough bread and cups of plain water into the chamber. They bow their heads, faces heavy with grief, as if sharing in your pain. You grasp their hands, whispering, "Hold on to each other with strength. Do not let the darkness drown hope." The whisper passes like a soft breeze across their ears, carrying comfort. It is said Anne asked to bring a small mirror in her valise, not to look upon herself, but to reflect candlelight upon the wall, casting shifting shadows to drive away terrifying darkness. You take out the mirror, letting the flames scatter glimmers across the damp wall. The shimmering streaks look like tiny souls soaring, reminding you that however deep the night, where there is fire, there is hope. You smile gently, telling yourself, "If it reflects my soul, may the world see I do not yield." In these days, you also take time to write down thoughts upon a small slip of paper. Tucking it into the folds of your gown, you write, "If Elizabeth one day should read this, know that I always loved you, even if I could not say farewell." Each stroke of ink sketches a heartbeat full of sorrow, yet overflowing with motherly love. The faint clang of the iron gate opening signals that someone will soon arrive. You recognize the priest permitted to deliver the final anointing. You rise, bow reverently, feeling the candlelight flicker upon once splendid courtly garments. The prayer is spoken, "May the merciful Lord receive the soul of Anne." The intonation rises like a solemn symphony, soothing the pain within you. You gently raise your eyes to the priest, your gaze glistening. Pray for the royal family, that they may awaken to their errors. Your voice carries a touch of light irony, a reminder that power does not come with immortality. The priest nods, as though perceiving both sorrow and strength in your eyes. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn truly asked for the final anointing, for some chronicles suggest she refused the full Catholic rite to preserve her dignity. You walk to the stone table, receiving a finely embroidered cloth handed by a lady in waiting. The cloth bears the Tudor rose, a symbol of lineage and love for country. You drape it lightly across your shoulders, feeling each carefully woven thread. You smile. Now this Tudor flower will not bloom again, but I remain an indelible memory. That evening, you lie quietly upon the coarse-lined bed. Outside the narrow window, moonlight falls upon the iron bars, casting striped shadows across the wall. The wind whistles softly through the cracks, like a cold lullaby. You close your eyes, letting the sound carry you into a fleeting dream, where you and Elizabeth walk hand in hand across lavender hills, untroubled by storms. At dawn, you awaken in time to see sunrise through the narrow window. The faint light paints orange and pink hues upon the cement wall. You think, though only 4 days remain, I will live each moment as radiant as the last summer. You exhale gently, letting all burdens drift away with the warm breath. On the final day, you spend the noon reading scripture, and by evening conversing with the ladies, telling them about the dungeons in France you once heard of, and how medieval prisoners used pieces of bread to write messages sent beyond the walls. They laugh softly, sharing, "If we could send such a message to Elizabeth, surely she would grow strong sooner." You nod, a warm smile etched in solitude's final hours. After a dinner of bread crusted and fragrant at the edges, you walk the chamber, tracing fingers along the old stone. Each mark recalls a memory. The first time you saw Henry, the first time you mounted the throne, the last time you sat at the trial's bench. You let slip the thought, if loyalty is the road, then this road leads straight into night. As night falls, you kneel in prayer one last time. The soft chants close the curtain on 4 final days, serene yet fierce. You open your eyes, gazing through the window one last time at the faint stars across the London sky. You think, wherever tomorrow leads, my soul will always be free. And then, you, Anne Boleyn, tilt your head with a smile in the dark, ready to face tomorrow, where history and legend will merge into a single eternal moment. You hold your head high as you step through the iron gate, letting the warm morning light slip through the thin veil of mist. The air in the Green Tower courtyard is heavy, filled with the scent of damp moss and woolen cloth. You, Anne Boleyn, wear a grey cloak trimmed with sheepskin, a bright red gown blazing like the final flame, feeling each heartbeat of yours merge with the faint rustle of the silk hem. On the morning of the 19th of May, 1536, only a few dozen witnesses were permitted to be present as you mounted the scaffold to face the sentence declared on the 15th of May. You clearly hear the wooden clogs of the guards clattering on the cold stone floor, mingling with the faint whispers of nobles standing around. Their faces are lined with sorrow. Some suppress tears, others furrow brows in regret. But you sense a solemn silence greater than any ceremony. Perhaps they are wagering whether you will smile before or after your final farewell. The wooden platform stood ready in the centre of the yard, beside the block prepared for your head, but you chose not to use it. You walk forward, each step deliberate, your hands folded before your chest like the lead actor in the final act. Each stone beneath your heel reverberates, echoing like an ASMR drum heralding the sacred moment. It was said that the red ribbon on your gown had been taken from the lining of the royal chapel curtain, hoped to bring protection for the soul. Even in the final instant, you gaze at the crowd, your eyes meeting those of a frail old official, once an ally in the charity fund. He bows his head respectfully. You return the gesture with a light nod, sending thanks for the brief days you could still stand tall. The bells of Westminster ring in the distance, like a final lull before silence. When the priest steps forward and lays his hand upon your shoulder for the final anointing, you tilt your head, closing your eyes as the warm oil spreads across your nape. The chant rises softly, blending with the breeze through the low trees beyond the wall. You smile inwardly. At least this rite has music, unlike that court so lacking in romance. Perhaps they should have served Earl Grey tea. You step to the stone, kneeling in the custom, keeping your back straight, bearing the dignity of a queen until the very end. You need no wooden block. You trust in yourself and the sword at your knee. Your hand rests upon the small rail, feeling the smooth grain, like history brushing against your skin. You half open your eyes, gazing at the gleaming blade. Your eyes blaze not pleading, but serene. You press your lips together and speak in French, voice as soft as breath. Bon Chrétien gens, I am come here to die according to law. The words ring into the silence, forming a perfect contrast with the sound of steel. You hear the throb of your own heart, announcing that history has just touched the earth. In that moment you are no longer the queen consort, but an unyielding symbol of fate and courage. Historians still debate whether the so-called merciful beheading reflected Henry's humanity or was merely a political maneuver to soften public reaction. You gently place your head upon the scaffold, eyes lifted to the pale sky above. You feel the wind rushing past your bound hair, carrying the belated song of a few early birds. In that serene moment, you no longer see the crumbling walls, no longer hear the whispers of judgment, only the open sky, ready to receive your soul in flight. With one decisive stroke, your life ends in silence. The only sound is the hiss of the sword through air, then solemn stillness pressing like a weight. Your shoulders release, lightened, as though leaving behind the burdens of crown and politics at your feet. In the final moment, you smile faintly, the smile of one who knows that even a short life leaves its mark. You depart the worldly stage, leaving behind a heavy crown and the resonance of history. A light applause stirs not judgment, but the last tribute to a woman who lived true to her own soul. Then, the morning shadows overtake the candles, and your soul ascends, free as the last Tudor flower rising against wind and frost. Asterisk. You feel the faint clatter of wooden clogs upon cold stone as you leave the courtroom, leaving behind all the glory and tragedy. The silence inside the chapel of St. Appleby, Peter ad Vincula, is absolute, broken only by the wind seeping through narrow cracks and the fall of brittle leaves upon the ground. You, the soul of Anne Boleyn, are about to be laid in a hurried resting place, the sensation both mournful and strange, like the final note of an ASMR symphony of history. On the 19th of May, 1536, after execution, Your body was wrapped in plain cloth, placed in a wooden chest, and buried quietly at the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, without a grand requiem or royal funeral. Beneath the rough-hewn vault, the royal carpenter was forced to raise a crude coffin, patched together from oak beams still bearing their joints. You hear the nails driven in tuck-tuck, echoing in the narrow space, like the tremor of a heart just ceased. Perhaps they thought you did not need a beautiful coffin, for your soul was already digitally archived in the memory of the realm. Candles were carried into the chapel hastily, only enough to light the way for the small procession. The ladies and a few priests followed in silence, bowing their heads like a mournful background score for the somber scene. The smell of spent candles and freshly sawn wood spread, mingling with the musty stone walls, creating a feeling both familiar and distant, like lying back on a velvet sofa, eyes closed in rest, amid the clutter of a storeroom. According to inner court legend, one lady quietly left upon your coffin a bouquet of dried violets, a symbol of fidelity with hope that their fragrance would guide your soul to rest. You see a small crack at the foot of the wall, like an ink line on a page, where George Boleyn once sat in secret meetings. Now, no one mentions him anymore, and that crack too is fading with time. You smile inwardly. If the crack could speak, surely it would say, "Thank you for bringing drama to the court of lullaby." The slow procession approaches the grave, marked only by a few uneven stones. No tombstone, no name, only a crude wooden plank hastily carved with the words "Hic iacet Anna Regina," here lies Queen Anne. The Latin echoes like a gentle poem, carrying you into a dream amidst the dark night. You feel the soft earth beneath your feet as the coffin is lowered into the grave. Each shovelful of dirt falling upon the wooden lid sounds thump, thump, like a soft drumbeat lulling you into the final late sleep. Your heart grows calm, without regret, only an odd serenity. Perhaps you would wish only to be laid in a hammock for a sleep from which you would never awaken. In that moment, you shake your head, recalling the first day you entered the palace, burning with power. Now, only a simple burial remains, like a hastily folded paper tossed into a mailbox. You tell yourself, power may fade, but the mark in the hearts of people will never be erased. The loyal ladies in waiting stretch out their hands to place a few keepsakes into the coffin. A small mirror, a piece of purple silk left from the coronation, and the will you hastily wrote for your daughter Elizabeth. Simple yet meaningful items, like a final letter sent out into the world. The sound of cloth being folded, fabric wrapping around the coffin, echoes softly like a lullaby for the soul. Historians still debate the true reason for the hasty burial. Was it that Henry wished to erase every trace completely, or merely to keep the royal household from political uproar? You hear the lid of the coffin being nailed shut, once more like the final heartbeat of a human life. In that moment, you smile. If the coffin lid is a period, then my soul will write on an exclamation mark in eternity. You feel the final warmth spreading, as a gentle reminder, let everything go and rise again. As the last stones fill the grave, the crowd holds their breath, bowing their heads in farewell. You see the grey sky outside the chapel door, like a dark velvet curtain descending. A light breeze drifts through the crack of the door, carrying the distant rumble of the Thames, like a lullaby for a long sleep. You know that every drop of water in the Tower of London will not wash away your memory, even if the hurried burial bore no mark of royal honour. The soul of Anne Boleyn will endure in every story, every painting, every page of history. You let out one last jest. If history could live stream, they'd have to replay this hasty burial hundreds of times. I'm it. At last, you, Anne Boleyn, rest in the soil of London, leaving behind a lesson of power, courage, and resilience. The candles in the chapel fade, closing the final chapter of a life, but opening the immortal journey of the Tudor legend. Asterisk. You walk through the solemn corridors of Hampton Court Palace, where the cold stone walls still hold the dew of morning, bearing the echoes of past splendid banquets. The morning sun filters through the high windows, painting wavering rays upon the floor tiles like dreamy ASMR notes. You, Anne Boleyn, have been laid to rest. And now, only 11 days after that fateful day, Henry VIII is ready for a new swift chapter. bringing Jane Seymour as queen. On the 30th of May, 1536, only 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry VIII held a secret wedding with Jane Seymour in the grounds of Hampton Court Palace, marking a decisive step away from the shadows of his former love. You feel the atmosphere, both solemn and rushed. There is no grand procession as when Anne was crowned, only the court musicians plucking lutes and viols gently, like a lilting backdrop for a wedding without fanfare. The sound of strings rings out clear, tinged with sorrow as though burying a foolish love. It was said that Jane Seymour, in the hasty wedding, wore Anne's old crown, a silent sign that the throne lay not in beauty, but in the heart of the one who held it. You see Henry leading Jane into the ceremonial hall, his azure blue attire blending with Jane's pure white gown colours, symbolising purity and hope. The decisiveness in Henry's eyes remains, but now without the fire of passion once seen for Anne. Instead, there is a meditative weariness, as of a man who has weathered a storm. The sound of wooden clogs striking the tiled floor resounds evenly, as if marking the step of history's shift. You jest quietly. If this wedding were live-streamed, surely the view count would make up for all the court drama. But all remains silent, only the music and the breath of the gathered guests. Jane bows her head in ritual, pledging loyalty in a gentle voice like a whisper, moving your heart though you rest in the dark grave. You see Jane smile softly, her eyes warm, a mere glance bringing peace, something Anne never gave Henry. Perhaps that was Jane's sharpest weapon. Historians still debate whether Jane Seymour was truly Henry's choice for love, or merely a political piece to resolve the crisis after Anne's death. You listen to whispers from the back rows. Jane never challenges power. She knows how to say yes, my lord, at the right time. Each word cuts deeper, sharper than any blade, into Anne's love story. But you, Anne's spirit, smile slyly. At least she knows how to end the drama. Perhaps Henry even hired a media advisor for Jane. The bells of Westminster echo far, signalling the wedding's end. Jane and Henry exchange rings, the gold glinting in the morning light, and you sense the faint sweetness of betrayal dissolve in the air. Perhaps in that moment, Jane prayed for Elizabeth Anne's daughter to live on, not in the shadow of a rushed marriage. You walk to the garden's edge, where rose bushes failed to bloom after the harsh winter, with only a few withered petals left. You let a petal fall into your palm, like a keepsake of memory. Its fragrance mingles with the scent of brocade and leather saddles from the royal riders, forming a symphony of smell both classical and faintly modern. The cornet sounds a farewell melody, closing the ceremony. Jane bows to the guests, then, hand in hand with Henry, quickly leaves for Whitehall Palace. Each crack of the whip on the horse's hide resounds like the final punctuation of a scandalous past. You recall the first time you wept at Henry's coldness. Now there is only the harsh clatter of hooves. You tell yourself, power is a hurried belt, buckled tight to ignore the story behind. Among the stone columns you let yourself drift into the resonance of the empty hall, savouring rare stillness. You smile softly, letting your soul rise beyond the walls of the Tower of London, where Anne was buried in haste. Each time the door opens, the wind whispers her name, sending hope that her story will not be forgotten. Thus, only 11 days after tragedy, a new chapter began. Jane Seymour, the gentle queen, stepping onto the throne that Anne had surrendered. You muse, if the crown can turn, then Anne Boleyn's story will forever turn within the heart of mankind, and the clatter of clogs echoes to your step, carrying the resonance of love, power, and the untold chapters of history. You stand amid the vast legacy that history has left behind, clearly feeling each breath of time echoing behind you. Anne Boleyn, who once endured the rise and fall of power and personal tragedy, is now not merely the last drop in the Tudor vial, but has become a lighthouse guiding a nation. In the year 1558, her daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, ascended the throne and reigned for 45 years, opening the golden age of England with brilliant achievements in culture, science, and overseas expansion. You can imagine the sight of English ships cutting across the Atlantic Ocean, carrying the ambitions of a new dynasty reaching outward. The image of Sir Francis Drake circling the globe, marking England's maritime strength, is also the spiritual child of Anne Boleyn's legacy. the religious and political revolution that freed England from the influence of Rome, laying the foundation for an independent and sovereign nation. If Anne was still alive, perhaps she would have started a YouTube channel called How to Break with the Roman Church in 6 Easy Steps. Anne's legacy lies not only in political and religious foundations, but also in every ray of English Renaissance, from Shakespeare to Francis Bacon. They turned words into sharp weapons, evoking freedom and humanism, reflecting the ideas Anne once nurtured as a lady-in-waiting, then queen. You almost hear the echo of the verse, "To be or not to be," resonating through the splendid halls of castles, like a belated tribute to Elizabeth's mother. There is a legend that on Green Park Hill, one sometimes sees the figure of a lady in grey gliding past, believed to be Anne Boleyn's ghost, returning to tend the flame of freedom's torch. Whenever the sunset paints the sky red, a few strange swallows circle, like a sacred reminder of her soul's endurance. You clearly feel the flow of time, as each Elizabethan generation, from Elizabeth I to Elizabeth II, remains deeply bound to the name of Anne Boleyn. Despite tragedy and the silence of a hurried burial, she planted the seed of the Tudor bloodline and laid the foundation for the dynasty that followed. You smile inwardly. If a bloodline could tell stories, then the Tudor lineage has written an epic. Amid the resonance of Big Ben's bells echoing far away, you compare it to the modern world. Power is not only a splendid throne, but also the voice, will, and influence over human civilization. Anne truly challenged Vatican authority, ignited the religious revolution, and laid the foundation for the Church of England, an independent, sovereign church. The image of her stepping onto the Westminster dais, declaring the king's supremacy, was like a political punch into the centre of Roman power, still reverberating today. Historians still debate whether Anne Boleyn was truly a principled religious revolutionary, or merely a tool for Henry VIII to consolidate royal power. One side praises her as a resilient politician, the other claims she was just an instigator behind the schism's drama. You tell yourself, a declaration written in red ink cannot be the whole story. History has flashes of colour invisible to the naked eye. The sound of turning pages in the Library of Parliament echoes like a symphony of intellect. You picture Renaissance scientists, from Robert Hooke to Isaac Newton, all benefiting from the freedom of thought Anne sparked. They no longer feared inquiry into the universe and nature under the shadow of the Roman Church, for they had been granted the right to seek truth. One step further, you hear the sound of carriage wheels rolling over cobblestones, carrying passengers to Tower Bridge. You smile with irony. If Anne Boleyn were alive, surely she would launch a historical tour named the Tudor Trail, guided by Elizabeth I herself. That tour would probably sell out before tickets even opened. Anne's influence stretched beyond England's borders. Across Europe, Protestant reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin looked at England's schism as an example for the struggle against ecclesiastical power. She became a symbol of women daring to challenge the system, paving the way for intellectual revolutions in gender and power for centuries to come. You gaze up at the grey sky above the towering Tower of London, a lasting symbol of power. You tell yourself, Anne did not only flow into the Tudor bloodline, but seeped into every pathway of free thought. Each wrinkle in the stone walls is a heartbeat of humanity, moving step by step beyond the shadows of the Middle Ages. As you walk through the long corridor of the Parliament Museum, the sounds of computers and keyboards echo like modern drumbeats. You smile. If she were alive, she would probably have her own blog to recount the break, rather than dry spoken tales. But one thing you know for sure, even without a blog, her legacy spreads powerfully. Ending the journey of imagination, you close your eyes, letting the scent of lavender from the Parliament garden blend with the whistle of a Thameslink train. You feel each breath like a final note. Anne Boleyn's legacy lies not only in history books but in humanity's eternal yearning for freedom. And when you open your eyes, gazing at the day's last sunset, you know that legacy will continue to shine, surpassing every tragedy, to become a guiding light for the future.